Hello fellow cinephiles, 90s Film Guru here. Thanks for joining me. If you're new to the channel, I started this channel to really talk about all things 90s. 90s TV shows and movies and a variety of other things. So thanks for joining me today. Today I'll be reviewing Scream 2. This came out in 1998 and was a continuation of Scream 1. Where we see all the characters in college and trying to move on with their lives after the events of what's transpired for them in Woodsboro. But ultimately the killer reappears and it's about Sydney and Gail and Dewey defending themselves against this particular killer. So with the success of the first film, they decided to make a sequel, and apparently Kevin Williamson always had a trilogy in mind. So after they wrapped on Scream 1, he went to Wes Craven and told him about his concept and idea for Scream 2. Either way, however it transpired, this is one of the great sequels, I think. It's a film that in many ways is slowly surpassing the original for me. Yes, the original was clever and unique and there hadn't been anything quite like that, and there wasn't anything that's quite meta about slasher films like that and self-aware. But there's just something about the second one I really loved. Like the first film, it has a great opening in my opinion, one of the best in the series, where it's Jada Pinkett Smith and Omar Epps and they're going to the movies and they're talking about how there isn't really great representation of African American characters in slasher films. And they go to see this horror film and ultimately end up dead. And Jada Pinkett Smith's performance in this is absolutely fantastic when it's revealed that the guy next to her isn't her boyfriend, but actually the killer in the mask. And she starts getting attacked and stabbed in the cinema, and everybody doesn't take any notice because they're so immersed in the first stab film that they're showing that they don't realize of what's really transpiring for her and how badly she's been injured until she climbs up on stage and dies. But I think this is one of the best openings. I've always been really impressed with this, and especially impressed with Jada's performance. I remember when this film first was coming out and they'd put the trailers on, and I lived on this farm with my father, but most of the time I was by myself in the middle of nowhere. So every time the trailer would come on, I'd freak out a little bit. I wasn't really young, but I was young enough to be freaked out by what was happening. I was about 16, I think, when this one came out. And there's just something about that always stuck with me. And every time I think of this film, I think of those trailers and I think of how I felt watching them when I was at home on this farm by myself in the middle of nowhere. I did actually see this one. I missed the first one on the big screen, but I actually saw this one. And it was kind of extraordinary. I used to have this old cinema where I lived. There was just one screen. It was a tiny cinema that only put on a handful of movies, but you'd only get one session of each film. And I just really remember being immersed in it. And this is about the period when I started to really get into horror. Like Scream was the beginning of it. And Scream 2 was a continuation of it when I was a bit older. And I remember us talking about it at school and how some people thought Randy was going to be the killer this time, even though he ended up dead. And Randy's death was always a topic of conversation, how shocking it was and surprised. Because Randy was always the character we connected most to, especially film nerds or people into film or horror. And when he's killed off, it's quite a shock. And there's a sadness to it. But as I've gotten older, this scene it just evolves for me in a different way. Yes, it is sad that he is killed off, but what a way to go out. And I really love how this whole sequence is done. And even though it's sad that he's gone, it's still kind of well done and interesting. And this is a technique of things Kevin Williamson would do later in movies and TV shows, where he would kill off characters that people really love just because he could, I suppose. Like I mentioned, it's slowly becoming my favourite Scream, or evolving past the first one. I remember when I first saw it and I liked it, but not as much. I thought Scream 1 was great, but as I've gotten older and matured, Scream 2 is just a much better film in my opinion. There's much more depth to it, it's longer, we experience more things with the characters. There's an evolution of the characters, especially Sydney and Dewey and Gail and Randy, and how they evolved and trying to move on from the horrors that they experienced in Woodsboro. And then when it starts happening again, the effect that has on them, that's something I've really enjoyed about this film. Like it said at college, there's a lot of things to like about this film. The third act is really cool. I really love that the whole ending takes place in this theatre, and we get to see who the killer is, and the reveal of one particular killer, which If you watch it again, you start to pick up on things that it could be him. But it's Billy Loomis's mother, Laura Metcalf, is really great here as the killer, and I really love what she does in this film. She's just wonderful. And it also has this really great chase sequence, which we don't get a lot of chase sequences anymore in slasher films. There's one with Gail, where she's being chased by Ghostface throughout the college in these particular rooms. It is so wonderfully done. Great suspense and action. Her performance is great. What they do to create the suspense and the chase that unfolds is absolutely fantastic to watch. And I really feel Kevin Williamson and Wes Craven really understood the importance of a chase scene in a horror film, and they executed it brilliantly. I like when they reintroduce us to the characters. I really liked, especially when Dewey reappears, you know, this surrogate big brother, as Sidney would say. And he's sort of, you know, affected by his wounds, he's got a limp, but he's sort of all about protecting them. It's like, since Tatum's death, Sidney has really become his surrogate sister, and he really cares and wants to protect her. And he starts to investigate why he's there, and Gail joins him, and it's all about them trying to work out what's going on. Where Sidney's not doing that as much in this film, she's more trying to look after a friend, to protect herself and work out what's happening. And there's all these things start to be dredged up because of what's happening. So it's really Gail and Dewey are the ones trying to work out what's going on, and Randy too, I suppose. And I love that. I think that was really cool, a great way to take these characters and make them in the forefront in a lot of ways, where they were important to the original film, but there's just something about the evolution of their characters in this one that really works for me. There's some great little cameos and stuff in it. There's, in one scene, far in the background with blonde hair, is Matthew Lillard. He just showed up to set because I think he was dating Neve Campbell at the time. He shows up to set and Wes just says, just go in the background. Oh, they will notice me. No, they won't. And you don't unless you pay attention. It's a really, really nice homage to the first film, and a great way to bring other actors back, which I liked. And I thought Michelle Gellar was really good. Wes Craven really enjoyed her so much that he wrote that him and Kevin Williamson come up with more scenes for her to be in. And that's why we had that scene in where the film studies where Randy and that are discussing sequels, and she's in that and has a really good moment. And ultimately, we see her later in the film, and her ultimate death is really cool, where she gets chased by the killer, and the suspense they create there is really great. And I think she does a really great performance, and you can see why Wes Craven really liked her. Like Randy says at one point in the film, sequels always bigger, carnage and blood, carnage candy. And that's kind of what this film does. The kills are a bit more full-on. We see many more of them. There's an aggressive nature to them. And they are all very impactful in ways. Randy dying, Sarah Michelle Gellar dying, the way that Derek dies. Like, there's all these really great elements to it and great scenes. And like how Jada Pinkett Smith and Omar Epps at the start die. It's all some really interesting things that evolved this film, and just bigger and better elements to this movie than there was in the first one, in my opinion. There is another really good sequence where Sidney and Hallie are in the back of a police car going to somewhere for police protection, and the two cops in the front, and they get attacked by Ghostface, and the car actually ultimately crashes and Ghostface is out cold. And Hallie and Sidney are trapped in the back of the car. They can't open the door, they can't get out the window, it's all protected. But the grate is bent, so they start to pull that back and climb in the front seat, thinking they can just open the door and climb over the killer quickly, and ultimately can't. And it's about how they have to go out over him, out through the window to escape. And then Sidney tries to open the door for Hallie, and she can't get out. She has to do the same thing. It's just really suspenseful moments. And even though they're free, they're able to go. Sidney wants to know who the killer is and returns, and that's ultimately how Hallie dies. But there's just a really great suspenseful moment and great scene, and that's just a testament to Wes Craven as a filmmaker and what he's able to do with this movie. This film also shows how strong Sidney is, and how every event that's happened to her, she's able to evolve and move past it. And she takes it all in her stride. Yes, she's shocked and frozen with fear to begin with, but she ultimately becomes so strong in this film and won't take any crap, and she stands on her own 2 feet. And I love that, and I think that's a great evolution of her character. In the end, this is just one of the great Scream sequels and another great Wes Craven movie. There's just something about the way he directs and has directed and the type of films he does make that I really love and have always been drawn to. And this is a film I've gone back to multiple times and I draw more out of it, much like New Nightmare. There's just something about these type of movies that I've really loved and enjoyed, and this is definitely one of my favourites. I'm going to give Scream 2 4.5 out of 5. I thoroughly enjoy this film every time I view it. I was a big fan of it when it first came out and continue to be even more. Absolutely love. Anyway, that's all from me today. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please subscribe down the bottom, follow me on Letterboxd and Facebook. Otherwise, until next time, enjoy the movies.